I'm Mario Martinez Jr., CEO and founder of Vengreso, and we are the creators of flymessage.io, the free personal writing assistant and text expander application. On each episode of this podcast, you will hear from sales leaders, practitioners, and influencers to help you grow your sales numbers at scale. So, get your pen and paper or iPad and keyboard and start taking notes as you're now listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode and a brand new season, the first of our season here, the 7th season of the Modern Selling Podcast. And man, I couldn't be more excited to have my friend, Mr. Matt Phillips. Now, you'll get to know Matt in just a moment, but he is the CEO of Matt Phillips Leadership Coaching, and we're going to be talking about mental toughness. And it's something that I have gotten in trouble for by my wife by telling my boys, hey man, you got to man up on this one or you can get through this. It's all about mind over matter. So I'm excited for this topic. Matt, welcome to the show, man.
Mario, man, so fired up to be here. I'm honored to be the first of this 7th season. So let's kick it off with a bang and just excited. Thank you for having me today.
You bet, man. And this is over 250 episodes, season number 7. And I started the Modern Selling Podcast with a small little vision, and that was in order to become an influencer, many of my peers out there told me that I needed to write a book. And I hate writing, although we've got 800 blogs on the website that I've written. But that having been said, I'm a short form content guy. In fact, here's a secret. I've never read a book cover to cover after college. And the ones that I did read in college, if I know exactly what they were, it was Mouse 1, Mouse 2 about the Holocaust. And it was a comic book that we were instructed to read for our college English class. But after that, never read a book cover to cover. And so when someone told me how to write a book, I was like, no way. I hate reading long form content, or I just can't get myself to do it. That having been said, I said, I'm going to go video and I'm going to go podcast. And that's what I did. And so I created the podcast so that I can do what I do best, which is talk.
It's huge though. So Mario, this is important, I think, for everybody listening to and I'll tell you a story about this, how I wrote my first book. And it was a place where I didn't think I would ever write a book in my entire life. But it's interesting that, when I started this business over 11 years ago, one of the first meetings I had was because I was just trying to learn, right? I think when you get into a new position or you feel like you should be doing something different, at least my first step is, well, I'm going to go ask people what they do so I can figure out if I want to do that, or at least learn about the different avenues that you can take, right? So one of the very first meetings I had was a friend of a friend introduced me to this guy named Ruben Gonzalez. And Ruben is a 4-time Olympian in the sport of luge, lives about 45 minutes south of me here in Denver in a town called Monument. And I met him for coffee. And part of our conversation, Ruben travels the world speaking. He's got multiple books, all these things. He made a comment to me that he said, if you want to separate yourself from other people, be seen as kind of an expert, getting into this business, right? I think this is true of sales, of finance, of accounting. It doesn't matter what role you're in, or a speaker or a coach, whatever you're at. He said, you have to have something that separates you from those other people, right? And in the business that we're in, right, Mario, it could be a pamphlet, a book, a podcast, a program, something that you create that is just different, that's unique to you, all these sorts of things. So here's what I like, right? I chose to go down this book route first 11 years ago. It's now shifted to, I have my podcast too. You'll be on that as a guest here coming up soon, all that sort of stuff, right? But he said, pick something that you enjoy, that you will like, that you'll get energy from. That's why I love that you picked video and podcast, because you look at it, the key to success, I believe, is picking something that you enjoy, first of all, but then also being consistent with it. And you've been just unbelievably consistent, 250 episodes, 7 seasons. I mean, come on, that's a beautiful thing that's happening. And it's the consistency, I think, gets people where they want to go in sales and starting a business and going up the leadership ranks, whatever it is. So honestly, kudos to you for picking that and staying consistent with it. I think it's awesome.
Bro, thank you very much for saying that. I mean, the truth of the matter is I look good, so who wouldn't want to look at me?
Got our money makers on the screen right
Yeah.
now.
My head is all of a sudden exploding here on Zoom for everybody that's listening in. You can't see the video, but the head just got ginormously large. I'm totally kidding, guys and gals that are out there listening in. Totally kidding.
But I'll finish this story with Ruben. Yeah. So I'm having this coffee with him, and I had two reasons for meeting Ruben that day, Mario. The first was that I had a nonprofit at the time that I was running, and it was helping athletes through different issues, right? So we had this list of top 10 themes, and I printed it out to take with me. And it was things like, transitioning to life after sports, or dealing with an injury, or dealing with failures, things like that were our themes. And part of it is I interview athletes, or would interview athletes for that. So I wanted Ruben to interview for this thing. So I was sitting at coffee, I slide him the 10, piece of paper with the 10 themes in front of him. I said, would you interview for this? And probably took him a quarter of a second to say yes, that he would interview. I'm like, sweet. And then the second reason was to ask him how he got to where he's at and what he does and how he structures his business. I just love learning from people. And so I'm asking question. And he mentioned that one that I just discussed. But we get to the end of we're 5 minutes from the end of the coffee. And I kid you not, he looks across the table at me. He goes, Matt, you want to write a book together? I go, excuse me? He goes, do you want to write a book together? And I tell you right there, Mario, I think that was one time in my life where I came up with so many excuses so quickly. It was unreal. I started saying, Ruben, I wouldn't even know where to start. Doesn't publishing a book, or writing a book take 2 years? And I don't even know where I'd find the time for that. And publishing, do you self-publish? How do you even start that? And editing, Ruben, I'm like, I don't even know I'm going on and on. And finally he goes, Matt, stop. He goes, can you write an article? And at this point, I'm so flustered, honestly, Mario, that I actually asked, I said, what do you mean an article? I was so flustered. And he goes, a newspaper article, magazine article, can you write an article? And I go, oh yeah, anybody can write an article. Well, he takes that piece of paper I'd put in front of him, flips it around, slides it right back in front of me, says, can you write 10 articles? I said, yes, Ruben, I can. He goes, good. Write your articles, send them to me. I'll add a word from Ruben at the back. We'll publish a book. 3 months later, we self-published a book. It's called Discovery, How to Become a Champion in Business and Life. And it's something I'm so proud of. We take lessons we learn from sports and how to translate them to business and just other areas of life. And something I'm so proud of because, again, it put me out of my comfort zone. It was something different. It challenged my confidence in myself, because that imposter syndrome, right? Who wants to hear from me? Or can I be that person out front? And it changed everything. It's been translated into Polish, of all languages. It's crazy, the story that just him asking me to do something different and unique set me on this path to where I'm at now. So I know a little longer story than to kick this thing off, but that was critical to my business. But it points at everything I've built was just getting uncomfortable, doing things, finding what I love, just like you with video and podcast, and just sticking with it and connecting with great people. That's what's helped me to get to this position today.
Man, I love that story. You obviously gave a little bit of background about how long you've been doing this leadership coaching with Matt Phillips, leadership coaching, your company. Just do us, everybody, a little favor. Do you guys work with salespeople? Do you work with sales leaders, or who are you working with? Cross-functional teams? What does exactly the leadership coaching business do?
Yeah, absolutely. Our bread and butter is working with sales people and sales teams. And we do cross-functional work, right? So I have, a number of different leadership teams. That's COO, CEO, all the C's, if you will, that I work with. But really, our focus is how do we come alongside sales leaders to not only elevate their game, but their teams as well. Because, in this environment of sales, it's highly competitive, just like athletics. We have to, again, be different. We have to separate ourselves, and we have to have this consistency and this mental toughness stuff that you mentioned at the beginning, and we have to be able to teach that to our people if we want to achieve the results that we want. So through coaching workshops, online programs, things of that nature, that's how we come alongside sales leaders to help them achieve those goals.
Fantastic. And I always ask this question of all my guests, and that is, tell us something nobody knows about you, even if they're looking at any or all of your social profiles.
Probably the thing I may have done a post on this. I can't remember. But one thing that I have gotten into over the past probably year is gravel bike riding. So it's like a road bike, but thicker tires basically for riding on gravel roads. And it was interesting. My dad passed away 9 years ago this past November. He had a 2-year battle with cancer, and about 2 years prior to him being diagnosed with cancer, all of a sudden he got into biking, like out of the blue. And I always remembered that and would see him riding and things like that. Obviously, I was older and, lived different places, but it's something that, a friend of mine kind of nudged me a little bit. And I thought about my dad. I'm like, oh man, that could be kind of a cool connection because he loved it so much before, he went down this path and unfortunately passed away. And so, so I have a gravel bike trainer right now because it's cold here in Colorado. And so we have the trainer set up with the gravel bike on it down in the basement, and I go down there a couple times a week and ride. And then when it's nice, I'll take it outside. And that's probably something people don't really, when you see me, I'm kind of broad shoulders, a little stocky, and people don't think like, oh, he rides a bike.
So I guess the more surprising thing is you actually have a gravel bike, dirt, something in the basement of your house?
Yeah, so it's just the bike I took the back wheel off and you hook it up to this trainer. So it's just like kind of like spinning, but just on your own bike. So that way you're used to your same seat, the same setup, all the sort of stuff. I can click in with my, shoes, and then I put this screen in front of me. It's got these cool rides I can do all over the world. And it's kind of a cool.
So you created your own Peloton.
It's like a Peloton, but just with my bike. Yeah. And cheaper. And cheaper.
Cheaper and way cheaper. Exactly. Nice. Well, good, man. Well, no, I didn't know that. I'm not surprised. I will say that my kids have got me now into mountain biking, my 13-year-old and my 9-year-old. And so I learned more about mountain biking in the last 6 months than I ever thought I would know or be interested in knowing. And so we are just now starting to take some more aggressive paths. Most cases, I'm sticking behind with my 9-year-old who quite can't do the same thing as my 13-year-old, but we're having a good time at it. And so it's lots of fun. So I'm glad to hear that. And let's get into some meat now, right? Straight into some topics of discussion that I think will resonate really well. And we talk a lot about mental toughness, right? The beginning of the year here, we're going into a new year. Maybe it's the beginning of your fiscal year. Maybe it's the beginning of your first quarter. Maybe it's the middle of your year. Who cares? But first off, let's define this topic of mental toughness. What is it? What isn't it? And how do you build it if you do need it?
Yes. This is so important to understand, because when I talk to sales leaders, especially in salespeople, I'll talk about, our kind of specialty, one of our bread and butters underneath that leadership umbrella is mental toughness. And people say, oh, my people need that, or I need that. And I think what I want people listening to just start paying attention to is there's lots of words that we use or phrases that are thrown out where we know what they mean, but we really don't know what they mean, like, because they're a little bit squishy and hard to define and things like that. And that's why this question is so important. Is like, what is mental toughness? And I always joke in speeches that I give, around, if I were to walk into your office today and I look you straight in the eye and I say, you need to be a better leader today. And then I turn around and I walk out. What are you left thinking? You're probably like, what the heck does Matt mean, right? Why wouldn't you? You'd be like, what does he mean? Like, show up earlier, stay later. Like, I used to walk fast in the office. People are like, wow, he's really busy. So walk faster in the office. Like, is that going to make me appear busier? And we have to put context, like definition around all these terms that we use, right? It's like, hey, team, you need to start working harder. Okay, I know what you mean, boss, but I really have no clue what you're saying. And so with this mental toughness stuff, we found that same thing, right? We would ask people what they think it means. And they talk a lot about, resiliency and getting back up after you've been knocked down, these sorts of things, which I agree with. Yet, what does it mean? What does it look like? And so we've gone through this definition of these 5 elements that we're driving towards, of someone who has a strong mindset, who is mentally tough, who is resilient, and 5 elements that we help salespeople and sales leaders build. So these 5 elements, if you're writing in your car, please don't write these down. But if you happen to be home listening to this, you can write each element down. But the first is confidence. Right, we're driving confidence. So do I have that 100% self-belief in my abilities? Am I proud of that person staring back at me in the mirror? And this is a key element to this that doesn't, you can still be confident not knowing what the next step is. You can still be confident and you're not the one that comes up with the big idea. You can still be confident and not know how to motivate that person fully yet. And so it starts from that place. So that's that first element, confidence. The second is focus. So what am I focused on? Why am I focused on it? What value is it driving? How do I avoid these distractions and shiny objects that are constantly being thrown at us? And that's all the way from priorities to building the pipeline to things at home that we're taking care of ourselves personally. How do we maintain that focus? The third element we talk about, Mario, with, we call it control. And I don't mean, I don't know if you're this way. I'm going to make an assumption you're kind of like me, but like I'm a pretty type A personality. I like to control things, but that's not what we mean. What I mean is emotional control, because especially with salespeople, we're driven by the highs and the lows so much. And so it's how do we learn to control the emotions and channel them the right way? So that's that third piece of control. Fourth piece is energy, right? So how do I wake up with the most energy possible and carry it through at a high level throughout the day? So we, in our coaching, take kind of a holistic approach where, we want to make sure stuff not only that we're teaching you is at home and at work applicable, but also that you're taking care of yourself along the way, right? So it matters what you eat. It matters what you drink. It matters that you're getting your sleep, things like that. So we'll, in some of our online programs, we have a whole nutrition section that my wife built. She has her nutrition certification to help us show up with the most energy possible. And then finally, and one of the most important elements is intentional, consistent action. So it's back to that word consistency. If I'm mentally tough, if I'm resilient, that means I'm consistent. That, behind me, there's this sign right here that I know you can't see if you're listening to this, but it says, just keep going. Just keep going means, again, when other people give up, you're keeping going, but that means you're being consistent with something, with sales outreach, with podcasts, with looking at your centers of influence, whatever it might be. With the workouts, it's like I'm being consistent. So I tell people all the time, my job is to come alongside you as a leader and make you unbelievably confident, focused, emotionally in control, have the energy you need to perform at a high level, and keep you focused on that intentional, consistent action. That's what's going to get you where you want to go. When you fall down, you get back up and focus on those things. That's what mental toughness is to me.
Okay. So the question then is got it on what is it,
yep.
But how do you build this?
That's a loaded question. So I'll give you a couple of examples. And first of all, I'll start with the confidence piece, right? That I believe that's foundational to everything. And one thing that, of a lot that I teach people is we are as salespeople quick to forget. Meaning quick to forget the successes, right? Because we're taught that, the year's over, take whatever that revenue number was for you and zero it out and let's go again. And that can be overwhelming, right? And that can be every quarter, it can be every month, just depending on the organization you work with. But we take something that we've experienced success in a lot of cases, and we start from scratch and we feel like we've got to go up this big mountain again, when the reality is that we forget the success we've had, and to leverage that and make it part of how we show up and what we leverage and kind of get going, right? So a lot of times I'll talk to salespeople and they'll be like, the pipeline's just not there. And I'm like, well, what are you doing? And they'll say, well, we're doing this activity, that activity, all these sorts of things, right? And then it's just starting to dive in and be like, well, so hold on a minute. Like, I know pipeline's been tough, but you've experienced something like this before, right? Where you've, had a tough start and you've come out of it before. And they're like, well, yeah. And then I'm like, well, tell me about that. Like, what happened and what do you do? And how did you start? How did you climb out of it? Who did you talk to? And it's teaching people to think backwards to remember the success that they've had in order to propel the action that they need to take going forward. And it's disciplined action, right? It's not just let's try everything. It's like we did certain things that led to success in the past. How do we repeat those behaviors and stay consistent? to build that confidence and to keep you focused on doing the right things. So that's just like one really, really simple example of like, that's how we start building. It's remembering those things, right? We had one of our group coaching calls the other day, and one of the leaders on the call had to have a difficult conversation. And those are scary. Those aren't fun. But first of all, I told people, well, hold on a minute. Why is it difficult? Why can't we look at it as just a conversation, first of all? And second of all, you've done this before, right? So let's remember that. Let's talk about it. Let's get specific about it so you remember that circumstance, so we can leverage that to go have this conversation that you need to have for this next time. So it's just preparing them differently to go attack kind of whatever that situation is. So there's just like a couple examples. I mean, there's so much underneath each of those 5 elements that are absolute game changers. But
Matt, would you argue though that this concept of mental toughness, whether it's confidence, control, being consistent, that these are behaviors that we can train ourselves on, or that you're just, some people walk into a room. First of all, I'm going to use you. Matt walks into a room, for those of you not listening or watching the video, and you're listening, like, the man has presence. You know, we talk about someone has presence. You have swagger. You have confidence. You have charisma. You have it. It's in your eyes. It's in your face. It's in your body positioning. It's in your vocal inflection, modulate, all that. You have those things. So can somebody have that and misuse it or use it incorrectly? And then somebody who doesn't have that, can they learn this?
This is such a great discussion, right? Because what we're talking about is nature versus nurture, right? Are you born with it or are you not? Or is it developed? And I talk to one of my coaches about this all the time, and I love this discussion, because my personal belief is that, you know, there are certain things that you are born with, right? I think there's an athletic ability. Like, some people can catch a ball and throw a ball better than others. Are born with that, right? And it's in that genes, it's kind of that DNA side of things. And some people cannot catch a ball or throw a ball. So there's a nature part of it. You're born with certain things. But I believe, and I know, we underestimate the nurture part, the development of it. So when we talk about like growing a great leader or becoming a great salesperson, it absolutely can be developed and should be developed if you're passionate about it, right? And it's little things like when you walk in a room, if you walk in a room with your head down, kind of looking down at the floor, or kind of looking at the chest down, I guess, of the people you're walking into that room with, if your body posture isn't good, you're already walking in kind of defeated into that room. So even simple tricks, which can be taught and practiced, is like, when you walk in a room, your shoulders are back, your chest is out, your head is up, you're looking people in the eye. You can learn to address people in the eye that way, even if you're not saying anything. That's something that can be taught and trained. No different than when we talk about, I hear a lot in, sales about all the activity we could do, right? Which can make us potentially undisciplined and scattered. And it's trying to figure out what are the things that are moving the needle, however many, 3 to name the number, doesn't matter. And how do we remain focused on that? So how do we start creating these triggers and reminders that when we start wandering off, which we all wander off, or maybe I'm alone in that, but we've got that trigger to remind us to go back and refocus onto those things. So it can be taught 100%. You have to love it though, right? So if I told you, Mario, that you had to go write books every day, you'd be like, oh, heck no, come on.
Well, actually now, so it's funny. My wife and I were literally just talking about this, and she goes, what's holding you back? It's 7 years. Look how many podcasts you have. Look at how many blogs you have. And I was like, oh, just it's such a daunting task to like take all the IP and put it together in a book. And we had that conversation. And of course, Facebook was listening on one of our 2 devices. And literally the next morning, she sends me a Facebook ad for a product that it says, got all these blogs, put them all together in this application, and in 1 hour, you'll have an entire book ready to go. You can launch it on Amazon, da-da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, oh, well, that seems interesting. And then, of course, I made the excuse. And the excuse was, that'll take a long time to actually have to import it all in, then look at the editing, then review the material. And I was like, So where I'm at is I made the excuse. I'm telling myself, I'm psyching myself out, essentially, is what I'm doing. Because I know it obviously is going to require work. Like, you just can't say, bring all these blogs in and create this great book. Like, there's got to be something there like you have to do for it. So I veer away from that because I've always seen this as a majorly daunting task. But nonetheless, it's something that is still there, and I got to talk myself into it, man.
Yes. But I think too, that's where when you look back, right? Because we all struggle with this, right? You heard my book story of me coming up with excuses, right? And the way that Ruben simplified it for me of writing articles, it took something extremely overwhelming and made it very manageable and achievable, because I thought anyone could do that. And I went and did it. And yet there were still points, I think we all deal with this, where the longest part, but the part of my book where I delayed the most was the cover. And we put mountains on it. And I sat and I'm like, well, are those the right mountains? Do I want to put a different mountains on there? And that was a cover for an excuse of, I'm scared to death to put this thing out there, or I don't think it's going to work, or something's going to go wrong. And when I finally dove into and understood like the belief behind it and what was really going on, that's what started to free me up for some of the stuff. So for you too, you can, take your already written articles. You're already like 30 steps ahead of where I was. But it's starting to understand, like, what beliefs are we carrying around, right? It's the same thing in sales, right? If we believe, like, do you believe you can get in that account or not? And build that relationship with that company. Do you believe that you can achieve a certain level of sales revenue or not? And that's where we spend a lot of time. When we talk about mental toughness, it's starting also to dive into some of the beliefs that we have to understand really what's behind that. Because that's all confidence, right? So it's understanding, with no judgment, where's that belief coming from? Why is it there? And then how do I rewire my brain to show me the path forward and to show me the path through? Because once we get on the other side of that, it's incredible. And I'm sure you have story after story after story of things you've overcome. I'm sure all the listeners have story after story after story of things that they've overcome in their life, and it can be used to challenge that belief and be like, well, is that really true? I don't know. Maybe it's a new level and you're going from 2 million to 5 million in revenue as a new goal. Maybe that you feel stretched, but you certainly did things to get to that level. How do we shift that belief? It's such a critical piece to, we talk about leading people. When we talk about selling, it's a skill to be able to, and can be taught to, take these tools that we have and put them into practice, because that's what opens up that possibility. I know, but sometimes it's like, I kind of, when I use certain words, I'm kind of like, yeah, it's cliche. Like, go find out what's possible and, go create what you want to create. And with those words, there's a lot of beliefs about those. And we have to be willing as salespeople and just, I believe, human beings, to look at those and be like, okay, how do I coach myself through that? And also, how do I coach my team through that in sales? Because your salespeople are thinking something. They're believing something right now. And so your job as that leader is to figure out, what are they believing and how do I make sure they're shifting those things to, in a lot of cases, get out of their own way. I mean, mountains on a book cover, Mario, that was getting in my way. And I'm so glad I finally pressed publish and off we go.
So what you described is two things that there's an element on the individual that requires us to learn how to focus. And with that focus, we can have that control. We can channel that energy somewhere or in a direction. And then there's a side on the leadership, which is learning how to switch from managing a team to developing a team. Yeah. So talk a little bit about the focus part, what the individual's responsibility is to be able to get through tough times or a hard job or hard role. And let's face it, sales is the hardest role in any role, company, job, period, and a discussion. I don't care what you say, because we're the only 5% of an employee base, maybe 10%, could be even as high as 15% of a company that will actually put our mortgage based upon hitting a quota, our car payment, our kids' education, our insurance, our health care, our family livelihood, everything based upon hitting a quota. So it's the hardest job because not everybody wants to do it. And if everybody wanted to do it, everybody would be in sales, and that's not the case. So talk a little bit about that side in terms of our responsibility, and then switch gears to like the sales leader on really learning how to manage the sales team to developing them over the course of time to be able to get better.
Yeah, it's a great question. So from an individual perspective, the way I look at it is, we have this, like, and I'll talk specifically about sales for a minute, right? But we have to understand, first of all, what our goals are, where we want to go. And one thing that, if salespeople are listening, and really taking this in, is I love asking the question, like, what motivates you? And 9 times out of 10, salespeople tell me money, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But I always go a level deeper. It's like, to what end? I give you $50 million today. Like, what are you spending it on? What are you using it? Like, what do you want to create? And so it's starting in that place of that vision of like, okay, this is why I'm doing this, right? And it's nice to have money, but so what? And spending time reflecting upon that, I think, is a critical step. The next step too is then making sure like we're taking time to reflect a little bit on what's working and what's not. And one of the areas I see and I struggle with for a long time was I would not take the time because I felt like I got to be on all the time. Go, call, email, like I'll do all these things, working out, I got to be going, because that's what salespeople do. And what I say is, unless we take a time to pause, and that could be for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, but it's to take a step back and see it from like a CEO role, if we will, right? So you run your business, because that's what salespeople do, right? You're running your own business. You're part of an organization, but you're in charge, right? To an extent, right? I know some people are like, no, my boss tells me I'm not in charge, but you're running your own business. You're building a book, right? And we have to shift our mindset to, are we getting the best return on our time with what we're doing? So I talk a lot about ROT. It's not ROI, return on investment, everybody knows, but it's ROT, return on time. Are we using our time well? So it's analyzing these activities that we're doing in alignment with where we want to go. Are those things going to move the needle and accelerate me to that point so I can do the things that I want to do? And if not, then we have to have that, oftentimes we hear like, well, say no. Well, that seems like kind of like a downer to me, right? It's like, what if we say just not yet? That's a nice idea, but not yet. So I'm going to pause that for now. Maybe I come back to it, but just not yet. Because I know that these 3 things, if I do that and stay consistent with that, that's going to help me achieve what I want to achieve. So that's from an individual perspective, like looking at those things, right? And that's where that personal side comes in too. It's like working out or, going on a date night with your, significant other or whatever it is. It's if we believe that this vision is important for us, then we know that if we do these things consistently, it's going to help us achieve those goals. And again, not just help us achieve it, but accelerate us towards those goals. So that's from that individual perspective, that focus area. I mean, I write down here, you can't see it, but right down here to my right, I have a list of our 4 priorities. And my wife is the CEO of our business. And I look at this constantly because I want to make sure that what I'm doing on a daily basis fits into this. Because I know if I do those 4 things, revenue's where I want it to be. We get to go on the family vacations and spend time together. We get to do these little adventures we want to do, all these sorts of things. And my wife is fabulous. I give her all the credit in the world for this, but because I think as salespeople, as even like business owners, things like that, it's like the next idea comes and we're like, ooh, that could blow up my sales, right? I'm going to do that now. Instead of my wife will come in and I have this random idea of like, let's do this. And she'll look at the board and be like, is that in alignment with the 4 things we talked about that's going to grow and scale this business? And then I have my pity party and I'm like, no, it's not. And then I adjust, right? And I get back on track. No, that's not to say that idea is not bad and I can't pilot it or try it, but I'm not going to throw everything I have at it because it may or may not work. So that's from like an individual perspective. And then from a leadership perspective, it's really the same thing, right? When we talk about, I'm a sales manager, I'm a sales leader. I'm like, no, you're a coach. You are a coach, right? So you look at athletics. I was fortunate to play Division I college baseball. I played professionally overseas for a little while, and we always had coaches, always. And they were there to help watch us, pay attention, look at what we were doing, and then coach us to optimize the things we were trying to do, right? So me in baseball, optimize my swing path, optimize the way I took ground balls, optimize my arm angle when I'm throwing from, shortstop or third base over to first to eliminate errors. It was things like that, that's what they were there to do. And so I believe our job as leaders is to ask those questions, right? Of, okay, so A, why do you want to achieve this? Like, what are we doing? And where do you want to go? Where do you want to be? It's nice that the company wants to be there. I know the company set your goal at this. That's great. Where do you want to be? And why do you want to be there? So what? And then starting to help them identify, like, what are the couple things that are going to move the needle? Where in the past have we seen these amazing correlations between that and revenue, or that and phone calls, or that and meetings? Like, how do you start coaching people through that, not only on the tactical side, but on the confidence side, and reminding them of where they've seen success in the past? I mean, there's a lot kind of buried in here, Mario, but that's our job. We're not there to manage. We're not there to look at a dashboard. A dashboard is it's a piece of information in Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever CRM. It's a piece of information that can lead us as leaders, as sales coaches, to the next question we need to ask our sales team so that they optimize their performance and their goals.
So you mean you suffer from squirrel syndrome too?
Oh, yes. Terrible.
Look, behind you. What's that?
I didn't look away. No.
That is a real tough one for many of us, especially in our line of business, right? Every bing, ding, and ting that we hear, anything that comes across our desk, the light lights up. These are all things that are pulling for our attention, and it's really hard. During the daytime, I actually prefer not to work during the day. I actually prefer to work in the night, in the evening. And obviously I work during the day, but I prefer at nighttime, because between that 10 o'clock and 1 o'clock in the morning, I can pound out 3 times more than what I could during the day, because during the day I've got ding, bing, bing, light, cameras, action, all this stuff that are happening. And it's so hard to remain focused. So sometimes when I'm like uber focused, that I've got to prospect, I've got to reach out, I've got to, whatever the case might be, I need to close out email, I need to close out LinkedIn, I need to close out Twitter, I need to close these things out, because they are just distractions. And to your part on coaching and really helping somebody to come up to the next level, I think one of the big challenges that I see happening is we as leaders, me included, we see a problem. And we try coaching, we try talking about it, then we coach again and we talk about it. And then we get to the point where we're frustrated. It's like, why aren't you doing it? What didn't you do? What didn't you understand? We talked about this. And what I came to realize more recently was some of the folks in my organization, they got promoted into some of these roles, and they've never even thought about doing it this way. And so we could talk about it till we're blue in the face, but sometimes you got to sit down and you say, let's do this together. And if you could do that one time, for example, remember the old days, Matt, when we were growing up in sales, we used to sit in a cubicle. Our sales manager used to sit right next to us. And then they had something called the Y connector. They would plug up the Y connector to our phone. They would listen in on one side of the conversation and they could hear us to the other ear what we were saying, right? And so we would sit there and they would coach us. They would even write notes for us, while we were there. And now with a remote environment, it's like, where's that Y connector at? You don't get to plug in and listen to your reps' calls. So if you're saying to them, your activity sucks and your conversations, you're not doing this, that, the other, or you're not leading, or you're just not performing, you got to get inside there and you got to listen. So tools like Gong, as an example, where it's going to listen and monitor your call. If you as a leader are not getting in there and listening to that call yourself, and then subsequently putting action plans and training and coaching, then you're screwed. And if you're talking to someone that's in sales enablement and they're asked to be able to put together an enablement plan, for training and awareness, and they've never done it, like, give them a starting point. Like, let's do this together. Here's my vision, or let me ask some friends and let me see if I can get you a copy of what someone has done before. At least be able to help get you started in that particular direction. And I think we forget that as leaders, that sometimes when we are asking someone to deliver on something, and then we start getting tougher, like, hey, I asked you for this. Hey, why aren't you doing this? And we start holding them accountable. We fail to realize that we may not have taken it all the way through to the best of our ability as a leader to help train, coach, and mentor by actually showing them how to do something.
Yes. And there's so much to unpack in this, because when you make that transition to leader, right, or manager, where I start with everyone is building out their leadership philosophy, right? And what I mean by that is, like, when you're sitting with someone and they ask you that question of, what's your leadership style? Or what do I need to do to be successful with you as my leader? Or what are your expectations of me? We got to ask it a bunch of different ways. That I see a lot of cliches thrown out because people have not spent the time to think through that. And not only just think, again, theoretically about it, but these are the actions that I'm going to take as your leader, and I expect you to take in order to help achieve this, right? These are expectations, and this is how you're going to see it unfold. And I think, first of all, to your point, if you believe in developing your team, then you have to invest the time. I believe if you want to achieve that, you have to invest the time in thinking about exactly what you talked about, right? Of how do I optimize this? Because oftentimes people will believe that if my boss is on the Y connector, that he or she is, like, judging everything I do, and they're nitpicking, and it's like Big Brother with the CRMs, like they're watching me only to somehow find the faults. Where I shifted it, if you believe that developing your people is important, right? And if it's not, tell them, like, you're on your own, figure it out. At least we're clear up front. They may not like it, but at least we're clear, right? Like, I'm never going to show you how to do anything. Okay, well, at least I know that, and I can go to a colleague. But we have to shift that perspective too, that we're here to optimize your performance. I'm not here to look for something that you're doing wrong. I want to figure out with you to help you achieve your goal, like what areas we could optimize. I mean, that's what we're really here to do, right? A 1% shift in the wording you use in a sales pitch could exponentially shoot up your sales and revenue, right? And that's that difference in the way we talk about it, these sorts of things. So I think you're bang on, is like, we forget that. And if it's important to us, we have to, as leaders, as managers, take the time to think through those things and start asking questions differently of our people. I mean, that's exactly what I teach when we're doing one-on-one coaching. We're doing the sales manager leadership program that we have, is learning how to coach and how to ask the right questions and how to motivate, because there's tools you can use if you take time to use them, that can make everyone's life easier, get everybody to achieve those goals, quicker. I mean, that's what we're really after, because you take the time to coach.
And correct me if I'm wrong, you mentioned earlier you have an entire workshop. Are there any resources that are available for individuals or leaders to be able to grab hold of, to be able to help them, with this mental toughness, especially especially with the stat that was released at the end of last year, that only 30% of sellers achieved their quota in 2023. Now that's pretty abysmal, right? So going into the new fiscal year as a sales rep, if you didn't hit your quota, and especially if you were far off on it, you're sitting there thinking, shoot, am I going to be fired? Am I going to be let go? Am I going to be looking for a new job? Right? And then you start doing the job hopping situation once every year. And it's just like this cycle. So any resources that are available to help someone?
Yeah. So from a leader perspective, and salespeople can benefit from this as well, is we are doing a free masterclass training that you can take advantage of. And it's basically how to become an elite sales leader and triple revenue growth. And I tell a lot of stories in there about clients, success stories that we've had. And a lot of it is based on the mindset shift that these individuals have taken, and adjustments to the way that they show up and the way they lead. And I'm going to share these stories and tactical things on this webinar. So we'll put a I'll send you the link, Mario, that you can include in the show notes of it. But it's if you go to mattphillipscoaching.com/live-event-webinar. It's a little longer one. We'll put it in the show notes, but go take a look at that because that could be a great resource for you. And, one thing I've mentioned, also if you go to mattphillipscoaching.com/metrics as well, I'm a big believer in knowing your numbers. And we talked a lot about that today, right? It's focus. So what activities driving the results that I want to achieve? And so we put this metrics cheat sheet together that you can take advantage of as well to just consider, like, where should I be focusing on from a metrics perspective that could help from not only a leadership perspective, but also a salesperson perspective, give you a kind of different look there. So those would be two like really easy ways, Mario, to get engaged there and think through that.
Fantastic, Matt. Appreciate you referencing that. Now, we're coming here on a close. Anything that you want to leave as a parting piece of knowledge to sales reps, sales leaders, as they kick off the new year, focusing in on what they need to do, which is hit a quota. And usually those quotas, I don't know why we do this. Whatever our quota was last year is plus 20% this year. It's like, it's the craziest thing in terms of growth. So any particular last message there before I ask you my last question?
No, great question. I would say the quality of leader that you become, and I'm not just talking about sales managers. I believe that if you're a leader, you're out there in front of the pack and you want to do amazing things. So whether you're an individual contributor or not, the quality of leader you become is based on the quality of questions you ask. And it's taking the time to reflect on where you're at, where you want to go, what you believe to be true, what you don't, and challenging some of the things that you know are getting in your way. And if we ask the right questions, it leads us to the right reflection and the right rewiring of our brain. And when we do that, we open up, again, the possibility, and we'll take the steps where we've hesitated in the past. So be willing to look in that mirror, be willing to ask the right questions to achieve the results that you want.
I love it. And I always ask this question of all my guests, and that is, tell us your all-time favorite movie.
I'm a baseball guy. I played lots of different sports. So with baseball in mind, I have to go with Field of Dreams. Have you seen that one, Mario?
Was that with Tom Hanks, or was that with
That's Kevin Costner.
Kevin Costner. Yeah.
It's a little older. Basically, this baseball field was built in the middle of Iowa, and then all these legends come back. And so just with my background, seeing these, fake legendary players come back, but there's a kind of bigger story behind it where right at the end, I don't want to ruin it for everyone, but right at the end, there's this moment where his dad shows up. Kevin Costner's dad comes out of the corn, and they get to have a catch. And he had held on to this regret and things like that from when his father passed away, all this sort of stuff. And they got to share this catch at the end. And so from watching these baseball legends perspective to, a story that I connect with, playing catch with my dad in the backyard and at the baseball field, things like that. That's one that has always, stuck with me, through the years. I love everything about it.
Oh, that's a beautiful memory, man. And I appreciate the sentimental part of the reference there as well. Even though that you've got a lot of presence, I know that there's a softie inside you, man.
There is.
I'm messing with you. Hey, for all of you listening in right now to the Modern Selling Podcast, don't turn that down quite yet. Listen to this very important message. Thanks for listening to the Modern Selling Podcast. Please do me a huge favor and give the Modern Selling Podcast a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. Oh, and don't forget, if you'd like to save 20 hours or more in a month and increase your productivity, go right now and download Fly Message, that's flymsg.io, for free. It's your free text expander and personal writing assistant. Hey, thanks for listening in, and until the next episode, good selling.